We've seen one thing in this campaign so far. It is so fluid. There is not, rock solid support for anybody except perhaps Ron Paul, who does get his 15 to 20%.
If Ron Paul wins here, what then?
Well, the Ron Paul people are not going to like my saying this, but to a certain degree it will discredit the Iowa caucuses because, rightly or wrongly, I think most of the Republican establishment thinks he's not going to end up as the nominee.
There is a healthy dose, an unhealthy amount of people in that movement who are 9/11 deniers. I keep running into them. They protest me. Big Ron Paul stickers and so forth. They're birthers. Look, we had people stand up and boo Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld.
They call them a war criminal.
Because again, you got a very
how
thin
big
friend.
is that crew?
It's not big at all. Remember, Ron Paul, who had a lot of very sort of mainstream issues regarding, say, the Federal Reserve and hard money.
Put a percentage of
a fraction, tiny.
So this poll says 51% of.
Look.
I know this poll is flawed.
This poll is flawed. No, but I do say this: Republicans had better be clear about this. We had a problem in the 1950s with the John Birch Society, and it took Bill Buckley standing up as a strong conservative and taking them on. And within our party, we got to be very careful about allowing these people who are the birthers and the 9/11 deniers to get too high a profile and say too much without setting the record straight.
What percentage of Republican voters? 5, 10?
I don't know, but whatever it is, it ought to be less because we need the leaders of our party to say, look, stop falling into the trap of the White House. Focus on the real issues.
And Ron Paul's different than that. He's a humble man. He's a person who truly is affixed to his ideas. He's not influenceable in any way. I just don't see him putting the country at stake.
And what you're saying is you don't think there's anything that the party could offer him. There's no prize for him here. He's not the kind of guy who would go for that.
I think it would be a mistake to try. I mean, this is a person who over time he wasn't even a person as a House member when I was a leadership staffer that we even really went after to try and get his vote. We knew he was going to stand on his own principles. That's why people love him. And in fact, it wasn't really worth trying to make a deal with him because he already had his mind made up.
In the revealing case of Dr. Ron Paul, who in 1996 sought to regain a seat in Congress after having a decade of not serving, Newt Gingrich did everything possible to keep him from returning to Washington. Gingrich went out of his way to get 50 members of Congress to endorse Dr. Paul's opponent in the Texas primary. Even former President George H.W. Bush campaigned for Dr. Paul's opponent at Gingrich's request. Despite all of Gingrich's efforts, Dr. Paul did win the primary and the election and did return to Congress. Why would the supposed leader of the conservative movement work to keep one of the Constitution's most stalwart defenders away from Washington, D.C.? The answer is that Gingrich is one of many who want to be known as a conservative, an undefined and shifting attitude. Many so-called conservatives today don't care to be reminded that there really is a Constitution that limits government power. Dr. Paul is more a constitutionalist than a conservative.
We have a strange candidate called Ron Paul, who was a congressman from Texas, which theoretically means he should be very far to the right. Instead, he's a libertarian. And he is catching on with the public, at least that part of the public on the internet, that funds campaigns. Last Sunday, just a few days ago, he put out an appeal on the internet for funds, picked up $6 million in one day. That's more than any of the other candidates has ever done in such a short time. So he is a major player, and he does not register as even 1% of the voters want him. So who are the people who just gave him $6 million? It's very difficult to figure out. And he's quite appealing as a politician when he speaks about ending the Internal Revenue Service and ending the personal income tax.
And another thing that we wanted to talk about, which is not at all related to wrestling, so no good segue there, is, Dave Horowitz is going after Ron Paul. And it's something he's done before, but this time, basically He's saying that for years, the Texas crackpot Ron Paul has been attacking America and Israel as important powers, the great Satan and little Satan. In case you missed that, that's Ron and Rand.
Rand, little mini Paul, mini Satan.
Little Satan, and calling for America to retreat from the battle against our totalitarian enemies. He also went on to say that Paul's Jew-hating stormtroopers descended on CPAC.
Jew-hating stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Who were those Jew-hating stormtroopers? Those are just libertarians like Ron Paulites are apparently all Jew-haters?
The Paulites. But basically this all came about because Ron Paul proposed some legislation that would cut some funding to Middle East countries, one of which was Israel, and he got a little bit upset and called Ron Paul an anti-Semite.
Well, you know, it just makes me so angry because you wonder why there's so much anger over these issues. It's because you can't even talk about Israel without instantly being labeled, you know, as somebody who's anti-Semitic. You can't have any kind of critique towards U.S. foreign policy, towards Israel, towards Israeli policy, towards the rest of the world without instantly being called an anti-Semite. And that's just so wrong. It's so closed-minded.
I really get a kick out of Ron Paul. I really like a lot of what he says. You can't like everything, but I like a lot of what he says. I think he's going to have a hard time, but I sort of, you know, really understand a lot of what he's saying. And a lot of what he's saying is not incorrect.
I'm sorry, but this Ron Paul is going to destroy this party if they keep, if this is nuts on parade. The media loves this guy as nuts on parade. They want the whole Republican Party to be identified with the kookiness of Ron Paul. Hey, let Iran get nukes. It's our fault anyway. 1979 happened because they weren't minding our own business. That audience goes nuts. Oh, my gosh. What am I watching here?
Matter of fact, it is so bad that the Saudis have turned to other people to try to deal with the Iranian situation instead of the United States of America. The Saudis are very angry about how we dealt with Hosni Mubarak. So, you know, slowly but surely, and let me be very honest. When I was looking at the debate Thursday night, and a certain candidate for president stood there and said he didn't see any problem with Iran getting a nuclear device because everybody else has one. I got to tell you, that's not the kind of guy that you need to have sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Okay. Who is that, sir? So.
Gee, I wonder if Ron Paul's racist. I can't quite tell. I'm going to need more information. Oh, but come on, somebody else might have written that and said it was Ron Paul. And he only published it for about 20 years straight. What? No, he's not responsible for that. My ass, he's not responsible for that. No, look, Ron Paul might be right about Iraq, and I think he is. But he's so dead wrong about this, let alone other issues, that even considering supporting Ron Paul is nuts.
Dismiss motivations for why they hate us, we can never resolve this. There's hate on both sides, but you have to ask the question, why do they hate? And they usually come up with a reason, and we're foolish not to take that into consideration.
Ben? Well, I've never heard anything quite like that in my whole life. What he's saying basically is we are doing something wrong by defending ourselves. Look, if these terrorists are trying to kill the government of Yemen, we've got to help defend them. They're our friends. We can't just let Al-Qaeda run wild. If we try to stop them, that's not sufficient provocation. Why should we stop them? Because they're terrorists and murderers, and they're very anti-American.
Why are they terrorists?
Why should we stop terrorists and murderers? Surely,
Larry,
Congressman, what do you think they're
Why are they terrorists?
They're terrorists and murderers because they're psychos. They're terrorists and murderers
because we're occupiers.
And murderers. But we, no, we're not occupiers. That's the same anti-Semitic argument we've heard over and over again. No, that's the same anti-Semitic argument we've heard over and over and over again.
Attack.
Look,
Larry, I think.
Punch him because Stossel's a libertarian. He's coming out here to actually explain to me what Ron Paul said because I really don't understand.
Well, directly ahead, will Ron Paul destroy the Republican Party? You saw Donald Trump get booed at CPAC because of Paul, and John Stossel will analyze the situation next. Stossel Matter segment tonight. As you may know, Donald Trump is considering a run for the presidency and spoke to a conservative group in Washington last week. Trump stirred the crowd up by saying Congressman Ron Paul could not win the Republican presidential nomination. Mr. Paul replied.
So I've won 11 times. So I don't know whether he has earned the, the right to criticize somebody for not winning an election when I don't know how many elections he's won so far himself.
Who's the leading candidate for the Republicans for 2012?
I don't know. Has the New York Times picked him for us yet?
I don't know. I keep hearing
the last one.
Yeah, I don't know.
I didn't see the Times
No thoughts?
today.
No thoughts?
I think Ron Paul. The war will be over. And basically, I agreed with Ron Paul on everything. There will be so much to clean up, I mean, other than war. We will have, I think even Obama.
But Ron Paul will be in his 80s by then. You know.
We got to find
Just be 33 in libertarian years.
That is true. That is.
And Ron Paul.
Now that's a different kettle of fish. The other than enjoying Newt Gingrich when he has a time limit on his answer. No, I remembered why I dislike libertarians so much. Saying government should be out of it is a perfectly good answer for 90% of the questions you will ever be presented with. It is not a good answer to what do you think of gay marriage? Oh, we should just get government out of the business of marriage. No, I'm sorry, marriage has consequences. Who gets to adopt? Who pays alimony? Who inherits? Some of this can be dealt with by private contract, but some of it can't. How do you get the blood test done? What, your tennis coach is going to marry you? That was just a cowardly thing to do, and this is what drives me crazy about libertarians. They dodge the tough questions.
Did you see you have to battle here? You get somebody, and this is gaining traction with people. Ron Paul comes in and he says, well, listen, the only way to really get money out of politics is to remove the government's job of regulating that, because what happens is, if they have any role in regulation, the lobbyists will be drawn to them. So their idea is what you were saying, hey man, if it's not going to get done well enough, let's just remove that as a function and allow the free market to work its way. And that, by definition, will take money out of politics. I think that's an argument that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, the problem is we will have no future. Because...
You don't want to soft sell that a little bit? No future! There's no future!
In the Stossel Matter segment tonight, Congressman Ron Paul from Texas is entering his third presidential campaign. But last night, it wasn't easy understanding him.
We're trying to unwind a Keynesian bubble that's been going on for 70 years, and you're not going to touch this problem until you liquidate the bad debt and the malinvestment, go back to work. But you have to have sound money. You have to recognize how we got into trouble. We got into trouble because we had a financial bubble, and it's caused by the Federal Reserve.
Ooh. Here now to explain that to me, John Stossel. I think it's Keynesian, right? Did he
Keynesian.
It's what?
Keynesian.
Keynesian. So I'm
pronounced K.
Right,
it's spelled Keynes, but pronounced Keynes.
What is that?
It's this idea that government spending can buoy the economy. It's what the stimulus was based on.
And that's based on John Maynard.
John Maynard Keynes, and he said the economy can get stuck.
And when was he around, John Maynard? When
80 years ago.
1712?
No, not that long ago.
Okay, 80 years ago. So the congressman is putting forth that the federal government should stay out of the economy. I agree with that. You agree with that to a certain extent. I mean, and we have to have oversight for the gangsters. And then he's saying the money supply, big money supply guy, wants to do away with the Fed, right?
Right.
Yeah. What's that all about?
Well, the Fed printed money, helped create the housing bubble. The Fed has kept interest rates low. That fueled the housing bubble, and now they're trying to prop it up. It's not just the Fed. I disagree there. It's the Fed and the government, Fannie and Freddie, saying we can't let housing prices drop. As Ron Paul said, you have to let the market clear so it can recover. And the conceit that the 12 people on the Fed can run a whole economy is terrible.
Okay, so he wants to execute or put them in Guantanamo Bay. What does he want to do with them?
He wants to abolish the Fed.
Get out of there.
We had a big recession in 1920, no Fed. Right. We recovered in 1921. You don't need them.
As Coulter says, he doesn't want to get involved with any issues pretty much. He wants just to let everybody do pretty much what they want.
That's not going to happen.
Without caveats or explanations, please define yourself using one word and one word only.
Oh, man, you so get us.
Congressman Paul?
Consistent. I'll give him that.